Hello, everyone. I'm Lucas Rickert. I'm a historian at the UW School of Pharmacy. I'm also the historical director at the American Institute for the History of Pharmacy. Thanks so much for listening. I'm pretty thrilled to talk to you today. Over the next 15 minutes or so, I'm here to share some news and some information with you. My goal is to offer some words of wisdom. Although you may not need those, probably not. At the end of this, I'm guessing you'll think this presentation wasn't very wise anyway. But as we see it at the UW SOP and at the American Institute for the History of Pharmacy, well, pharmacy history really has tremendous value in today's changing times. Look, a lot is happening in 2021, and history helps us see clearly. Both in the School of Pharmacy and at the Institute, there's a long tradition of looking backward in order to see forward. We're not marketers, though, we're humanists. To put this another way, we study the history of pharmacy to try and understand what's going on in the present. And your overall education is going to be enriched, we hope, by spending some time digging into the history of pharmaceuticals, pharmacy, and medicine. Not only will history provide you with a sort of a good grounding in the immediate outlook, but it'll also place you in a much better position to be in the know. Maybe you're looking way ahead into the future right now. That's possible. Or maybe, who knows, maybe you're just focused on tomorrow. And it's important to have frank talks on your future, whether or not that's in pharmacy or not. I'm guessing that any way you cut it, you're trying to understand if there's a bright future ahead and what that'll actually look like. The history in the School of Pharmacy and through the Institute sets you up to understand pharmacy practice, not only contemporary wise, but also in the past. Understanding pharmacy history forces those in the profession and others to engage with ethics, namely how to conduct yourself in an ethical manner. And if you're a pharmacist, how to think about quote unquote contributing to the interests of the community, as this ad suggests. To put this differently, through the history courses in our program, you're going to get exposed to multiple perspectives in pharmacy beyond the big picture and lots of perspectives. You're also going to get straight up facts about pharmacy and pharmaceuticals. What kind of facts and perspectives are you going to hear about? Well, just let me give you a couple to begin. First of all, Edward Cremers. UW Madison has a really unique tradition with respect to teaching history and teaching contested substances more generally. It really began with this chap. His name was Edward Cremers, who lived from 1864 to 1941. He was the second director of the UW Department of Pharmacy that later became the UW School of Pharmacy. He was trained as a chemist and a pharmacist, and throughout his career, he very much believed in the value of history and the value of humanistic research in pharmacy and the health sciences more broadly. Way back in 1892, he said, and I quote, "In our utilitarian and materialistic age, too little attention is given to history, even in the academic courses of our colleges and universities," unquote. He was very young, 27 at the time, and he was presenting a paper at the American Pharmaceutical Association's annual meeting. What he was doing was offering a wide ranging critique of the current state of pharmacy education in the United States. And he thought it was really important for pharmacists to get a holistic education, to get multiple perspectives, if you will. And I'll quote him one more time. He said, "The isolation of professional students is today one of the curses of professional education. Daily contact with those whose thoughts run along other channels is one of the greatest factors in true education of all students." So that's what we believe in teaching the history of pharmacy and in the School of Pharmacy more generally. It's important to provide students with a well-rounded education that includes a little bit of the humanities thrown in for good measure. Because with that perspective, what you get is an understanding of mask debates aren't particularly new. Mask debates go back a good long ways, over 100 years ago, in fact. What you do is you get an understanding of issues around African Americans in the School of Pharmacy and more generally in the United States. So here is Leo Butts. Leo Butts is the first African American graduate in the UW SOP. He was certainly a pioneer and certainly a serious critical thinker. And if I'm not mistaken, the technical term for someone like Leo Butts in pharmacy, and I could be wrong though, is badass. I'm maybe beyond African Americans in the UW School of Pharmacy. Maybe you want to learn about how the civil rights movement and African American activists challenged segregation, particularly in pharmacies, as this picture shows. Or maybe you want to learn about African Americans behind the counter, not only in 1920, but also in 1965. Perhaps you want to learn about other types of pharmacists, women pharmacists, here standing in front of bottles or here corking bottles, maybe filling bottles, or maybe just looking at bottles. It could very well be that you want to learn about women training and educational practices. One aspect of the history of pharmacy that hasn't been written about very effectively in the past is the very, very important role of women in the profession. And now, of course, half of all pharmacists in the United States are women. Maybe you want to learn more about someone like Edna Gleason, a California pharmacist and drugstore owner who balked at price slashing practices of chain store competitors and then decided to spearhead a local price control movement to protect her own bottom line. Gleason emerged as a stalwart defender of traditional pharmaceutical practices and community activism. She offered medical advice, delivery services, and prescription compounding, which were services not offered by department stores. Gleason was pretty amazing. She cultivated a reputation for providing indigent community members with medical advice and services. And guess what her nickname was? It was Dynamite. Uh, and I'm not kidding. I believe, though, that the technical term for someone like Edna Gleason in pharmacy, and I could be wrong about this, but I believe it's badass. It could be, though, that maybe you're interested more particularly in American pharmacy in the 20th century in a broad sense, and you want to learn about the practice and the profession. And in particular, you want to think about the pharmaceutical era. And that wouldn't be surprising because pharmaceuticals generate a lot of heat, a lot of anxiety, and in fact have become a little bit of a hot button issue. There are discussions about how drug companies deceive us. There's discussion about how much money it actually costs to develop an innovative pill. There's discussion about the power and the reputation of certain companies, discussion about, well, power again, but also policy. And there's discussion about, yes, you are reading that correctly. Are we in the era of Pharmageddon? Not Armageddon. Is this an era of Pharmageddon? When you think about the history of the pharmaceutical industry, you have to think back about this guy Paracelsus, essentially the modern pharmaceutical industry comes from two different places. It comes from small apothecary shops that moved into wholesale production of drugs such as morphine and others, but then it also comes from major companies that were dealing with dye stuffs. And so you'd learn about that if you decided to get into these classes, right? You could come and join us at the American Institute for the History of Pharmacy and get your hands dirty in the archives and do some basic research looking at adulteration and counterfeiting, or looking at the preservation and stabilization of drugs, or maybe looking at merchandising methods, advertising, and promotionals, or you just maybe wanted to look at something a little bit like C39K. Maybe that's what you want to learn about. Of course, this is not a thing at all, but what definitely is a thing is pharmaceutical advertising that stretches all the way back to the mid 1800s to help sell what were called patent medicines to educated and uneducated patient consumers alike for all sorts of different things. Uh, all sorts of different things. Parker's tonic, which was to restore you. The one guy on the left definitely needed some Parker's tonic because, well, he doesn't look very good. He needs to be restored, that's for sure. And so you want to learn about the different phases of the drug industry because it's not like there's just one sort of uh, one little part of this. There are multiple parts of this. You got one part which is about the emergence. You got one little phase which is about this golden era. Then you got a new third era which is about social reassessment and growth. And then finally you got another phase, market challenges and activism. It could be that the pharmaceutical industry bores the pants off you and you just want to learn about cannabis, which was, of course, a medicine that was in the US pharmacopoeia going back to the early 1800s and was used pretty regularly throughout the United States. Uh, Cannabis extract, cannabis medicines were widely available. Well, but maybe you're not interested in cannabis at all. Maybe you're interested in cocaine as a medicine, cocaine for women's complaints and cocaine for young children who are having dental problems. It could very well be that cannabis and cocaine don't interest you at all. Maybe it's heroin as a medicine that interests you. Of course, all of these medicines were unregulated and widely available, sold over the counter for the longest time. Not only were cocaine drops marketed for children, but heroin was marketed to children as well. Of course, it's a totally different era than it is now. Uh, but Big Pharma, as we know it, such as Bayer and other companies, were right in there selling these things. But maybe those drugs don't interest you in the slightest. Maybe those drugs bore the pants off you, and you'd rather learn about electric hairbrushes, which are and remain a remarkable curiosity. Then again, glass that's green, maybe that's your thing. These are also remarkable curiosities for some. You never know. Colorful globes could do it for you. I don't know. It could also be that you hate the idea of all these topics I've mentioned and that you can't stand glass. You can't stand the thought of electric hairbrushes. You can't stand the thought of wild and wacky drugs like cannabis and cocaine. And these, in fact, make you super gross, make you feel really, really kind of dirty. And maybe you want to think about cleaning up with Pear's soap. But maybe you want to think about having a sweet. Maybe the history of pharmacy is all about stuffies. And this is an image from Helena, Montana in 1962. And here what you can see is the inside of a pharmacy where kids can go and peruse the aisles. Kids were also getting other things. Um, Wild and wacky hats could be what you're most interested in the history of pharmacy. Really, it's rare that people focus on this topic. Really haven't heard much about loony lids. Really, no one has written about this, and maybe for good reason. But you can't study pharmacy without thinking about merchandising and retailing and how loony lids were sold to youngsters across the nation. Now, if you're wondering where all the images and sources are coming from this probably strange and rather weird presentation compared to some of my colleagues, they come from the American Institute for the History of Pharmacy, which is based in the UW School of Pharmacy. It's a world-leading collection of ephemera, of archives, of advertising material, which you've just seen. And there are books and books and books and catalogs and sources. This is called a shelfie. Yes, this shelfie is of our trade catalog collection. These are some of the rarest, most interesting books they have, although they look pretty dull from this shelfie. This shelfie is also of old books, and this bookie, this is not a shelfie, this is a bookie. Um, I guess what this will teach you is all sorts of spells, a Patronum spell, an Accio spell, a Lumo spell. I don't believe the Avacadabra is in this particular book, but there you go. Of course, I'm joking. This book is all about ancient medicine, and there aren't any magical spells in here at all, sadly. If there were, I wouldn't be doing this talk. I'd be probably ruling the world. This shelfie, well, who's this guy? He's bombed this shelfie. His name is Urdang, George Urdang. I have a research chair. I occupy a research chair named after him, although I prefer fleece to bow ties and suits while I'm working from home during the pandemic. Um, I'm, I don't want to slag the fact that he was a fan of bow ties, because I definitely respect very much that George Urdang fled Nazi Germany and came to the United States to help establish um, the Institute. And yeah, there he is. Great set of glasses, a great bow tie, a pioneer in the history of pharmacy in the United States. This guy in the shelfie, well, here that's me. I'm looking kind of spaced out after a day of digging around in the archives, getting my hands dusty and dirty, looking for materials for this presentation. So yeah, there I am. Better put an orange arrow beside that in case you couldn't figure that out. Um, so what else are we doing at the Institute besides offering classes and offering materials for researchers? Well, we have a publication, and the publication is called Pharmacy and History. Pharmacy and History was established in 1959, so if you do your math, that's, well, pretty old. And it's changed a lot over the years in the look and the feel. Um, so it started off green, and then it sort of became blue, and then it changed dramatically and became kind of pinkish there. But then the evolution and change didn't stop, and in fact, it became kind of gray, blackish gray. But then it became orange, and uh, and then it really started to change when I showed up a couple of years ago, and it became blue and orange. Um, Now, in this journal, should you decide to be at the UW School of Madison, sorry, at the School of Pharmacy, you'll have an opportunity to read this as much as you possibly can. And you'll also have the opportunity to take part in some of the programming that we offer. We offer um, periodic lectures and festivals of pharmacy history, where your socks will be knocked right off by amazing perspectives and facts about the history. And, that's one example, and here's another example where we focused in on cannabis history as a medicine, and we brought in some of the best and the brightest to talk us through some of the great revelations that they'd come up with. So that's a whirlwind tour of what you'll get in the history of pharmacy, should you decide to be in Madison. And by all means, I hope you do decide to be in Madison, because it'd be great to have you part of the project and part of the team and part of the family, part of the community. And by all means, at any point in time you want to reach out and learn more, just send me an email, and I'll respond. So thanks again. Um, There's just another quick image for you. This is the end. This is the end. It's been a pleasure telling you about the history of pharmacy and pharmaceuticals. If you want to learn more about this slide, about the Institute, or about the School of Pharmacy, please take a look around on the websites and get in touch. Thanks for your time.